Tonight we're here with Martha Hickson. I just introduced her as one of the bravest librarians in New Jersey and the world, and I love for her to tell her story tonight. Do you think I should start with a clip of the librarians, or do you want to just start with your story? This is the official trailer.
I'm doing a criminal investigation into some of your staff. Essentially, the librarians are my suspects.
Have you a real love of people, books, and learning? You may well consider the vocation of a librarian.
It didn't dawn on us that we would come under attack.
The word I have on my heart is repentance. We have librarians who are misunderstanding what is healthy and good for children.
When I was first attacked, student's mother was calling me a pornographer, pedophile, and groomer of children.
Do not interrupt.
That was my office. These are two books that I was asked to be removed, and I would not remove them.
We're going to pull books off the shelves, stamp, color purple.
Yep, there's your nudity right there.
Get rid of them. Get rid of them. This book was banned.
I would like to know how the history of the KKK is pornographic.
We have a movement within America that has decided that school boards are now where they want to push their agenda.
This stuff is coming into your schools, and it's probably already there.
Part of the ethics of our profession to support the First Amendment and fight censorship. I've had former students reach out to me that have told me books have saved them. I'm going to speak out about it.
This is not a communist nation. You do not get to pick our reading material. It is ours.
You're trying to arrest librarians. You're a fascist. You're a fascist.
I cannot imagine my face on the wanted poster and my friends being taken away in handcuffs.
You're coming for teachers and librarians, and they know it.
This is a spiritual war.
Our goal is to spread this into other communities.
This is about taking away rights.
I'm here today to implore you to listen to librarians.
What is going on?
This can't be America. No, this can't be America.
Wow, that was a really powerful trailer. I'd forgotten how powerful it was, that it really captured some of the most important stories. There were a lot of stories. Was that gentleman a priest? I forget. A minister?
Reverend Dove. He's a minister, a pastor from Florida, from Clay County, Florida. And every time I watch the film, I've seen it about 20 times now. I really can't watch it anymore. It's a intensely emotional and traumatic experience for me to relive. But every time I watch it, Reverend Dove makes me cry. He just kind of came out of the shadows to help Julie Miller down there, and with this very quiet strength and dignity that, I wish I had him by my side when I was going through it. He's just remarkable. And one of my fondest wishes is to meet him in person. We've spoken on the phone, but I really want to meet him and give him a big hug.
Mm-hmm. I felt that way when I saw it the second time. Wow. He speaks such common sense, and yet among craziness, and his voice resounded. Yeah. So, okay. So let's say, so how many of the students saw the film, and maybe does anybody have some initial questions to get us started before I start with all of mine? Well, let me start with one that was unless we have folks, feel free to just raise your hands or shout out, because I don't mind being interrupted, and I don't think Martha does either.
No.
One of the things that came up when we were talking about the film at NJLA was the impact that it had. What our baby librarians were thinking when they saw this, and I've been advising our students who have watched this film informally when they could, or at various viewings, because our students are all over the country in some cases. you are, I know you had a second career, but you're a veteran librarian. You had tenure in your school district. You had a community that you had already had some support from, and students who loved you, and all of that stuff in place. Is it possible for somebody coming into a position early on to take the stance that you took? And what would you advise for them?
I think it's possible for them to take the stance being that you, as a ALA trained librarian, it is part of your very fiber to oppose censorship. Yes, you can take that stance, but you can't be out front and as strident and stubborn and vocal as perhaps I and others in the film were, if you want to continue in that workplace. It just won't happen. I mean, even, by the time this happened, the story that you see in the film happened, I had been in my position for 17 years at that point. And even so, the superintendent was threatening tenure charges against me. So if you're, in your first couple of years, or if you're in a state where tenure is not available, then you're going to have to tread much more lightly. And what I recommend to everyone, and this is, censorship aside, in your first few years, months, days, even in your position, you want to start surveying the landscape, kind of understanding who the players are, who's pushing the buttons and controlling the levers, and then make sure you ingratiate yourself appropriately. And, figure out who's holding the power, and who you need to connect with in order to seize or harness that power when you need it. Certainly, if you have a union, if you're in a state where union representation is possible, those are relationships you want to build. You want to kind of figure out which of the veteran teachers on staff might be similarly aligned in terms of valuing the written and spoken word and the freedom of information, so that, God forbid, something like this comes for you. And that's the way it goes. They're coming for you these days, not the book. They are attacking people. You would need a veteran to kind of stand up front and be the firewall for you, so that you can provide the talking points, you can provide direction and strategy. But in terms of being the voice and face of it, I wouldn't advise it if you're in your first, if you're without tenure protection.
One of the lessons that, I attended the school board meetings, and I encouraged our students in those couple of years to, maybe 3 years, to attend the school board meetings. And folks, I don't know if they know what was actually going on, that there were 4 or 5 books that the board was voting on. Genderqueer was one of them, Funhouse. Maybe you can talk about what the specific issue was at North Hunterdon.
Sure. I do want to preface it by saying, when you see the film, if you've seen it already, or when you do see it, please recognize that, certainly for my story and for each of the featured librarians, the film really just scratches the surface. And that's not a criticism of the film. It's due to the very broad scope that Kim chose to portray, which I think is in service of the story, because this is a very broad nationwide story. So you just see a fraction of each of our tales. And my story actually precedes all of this. My first brush with this happened in 2019, when the superintendent of our school district, and I will name him, I am going to name the names because I can burn my bridges now that I've retired, and I intend to burn every bridge down. Jeffrey Bender, now no longer with the district, but he demanded in 2019 that I remove Alison Bechdel's Fun Home from the library, and on his say-so, because he was convinced it was porn. And I told him that I would not do that on his say-so, that we do have a policy in place for how you challenge a book. And if he wished to challenge that book, he needed to follow the policy and the process. And he said it didn't apply to him. And I said, oh, yes, it does. Because otherwise, you could waltz through this building on any day of the week and get rid of You could burn the whole library down just because you didn't like the color of this book, the picture on the cover, whatever. So that led to a very protracted battle, and that's where the saber rattling started regarding my tenure status. And when he eventually changed the library policy, and then all hell broke loose. And this went on for 9 months, me and him battling back and forth. In the end, the policy went back to what we originally had. The book stayed on the shelf. I'm still standing. He is not.
And there's more. You also got legislation passed in the state.
That's to come. That's to come.
Okay.
So that's 2019, right? And
Yeah.
at the time, I thought that was the worst thing that could have happened in my career. I was, verklempt. I was so upset. Now, in retrospect, I'm so thankful it happened because I learned that was like my censorship boot camp. Through that whole process, I learned all the steps I needed to take. That's when I first built my relationship with the ALA Office for Intellectual Freedom. That's when I first learned about the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund and the National Coalition Against Censorship and PEN America. So when on September 28th, 2021, and this is the event that you see in the film, that is a date that divides my life. I will never see my pre-2021 life again. It has changed forever. I'll never get it back. And on that night, a group of parents, about 25 or 30 of them, showed up at the board meeting. I had some forewarning that this was going to occur. Colleen, this will be a name that's meaningful to you. Greg Cottrell, who was our principal.
Yep.
He and I started as new teachers in the district, same day, same time in 2005. He was hired to teach small engines. You got a problem with your lawnmower or your sewing machine? Greg's your boy. But by 2021, Greg was my principal, the sewing machine and lawnmower guy. So Mr. Sewing Machine and Lawnmower showed up in my office while I was eating my lunch, reading the New York Times book review. I kid you not. And he said, "Oh, I hear a rumor there might be a complaint about a book." And I'm like, "Oh, really? What book?" And he said genderqueer. So I fired up Tidal Wave, printed out all the reviews for him. And since he had been Jeffrey Bender's handmaiden during the Fun Home fiasco, he was well aware of what the process was, what the policy was, and what a fierce adversary I would be. So I sent him off equipped with that material, and I very naively figured, it's handled. We'll see what happens. So I went home that night, told my husband, "Oh, here's this weird thing that happened at work." And we, instead of watching Jeopardy as we normally did at 7:00, we fired up the ever so exciting North Hunterdon Voorhees Board of Education meeting, where when it came time for public comments, all hell broke loose. And this group of 25 to 30 parents stood up one by one. And they did in fact complain about genderqueer, and they came prepared, as we're all accustomed to seeing now. They had handouts with isolated images from genderqueer. That's because graphic novels, it's very easy to decontextualize a single image. So they had that. They also went after that night Lawn Boy by Jonathan Evison. Same deal. They selected, the juicy paragraphs and had those all printed out to distribute. And there were audible gasps as they handed these things out. People just, their hair curled in shock. And then they started talking about what they were handing out. Of course, they referred to it as obscene and disgusting and depraved and pornography. And then they started talking about the person who checked these materials out to their students. And of course, that person was me. And by name, they called me a pornographer, pedophile, and groomer of children. This happened to be, I don't think that they were this savvy, but it happened to be during Banned Books Week. And as Colleen will tell you, every year I always had a very big, colorful display up for Banned Books Week. I always ran some kind of contest for the kids, and this year was no different. Yeah. Of course, they complained about that. And how dare she promote banned books. And the contest that year was actually was trying to trick the kids into brushing up their catalog skills. So the contest that year was for them to figure out which of the top 10 banned books were owned in our library. And all they had to do was look in the library catalog. They'd be entered into a drawing for a $10 Dunkin' Donuts gift card. Oh my God, she's giving away a Dunkin' Donuts gift card. Where did she get the $10? This was a serious conversation at the board meeting. Anyway, this went on for about 40 minutes, the demonizing of the librarian. Meanwhile, I'm at home. When I heard the pornographer, pedophile, groomer of children language, I nearly vomited. Nobody wants to hear their name in that context, but I have a sibling who was, as a child, abused by somebody. So they didn't know it, but they were really going after something very, very sensitive and deep. Anyway, I was processing then in a much more severe way than I'm processing now, but I very quickly, the logical part of my brain was like, okay, you can do these emotions later, but right now you have to act. Thank God for the 2019 thing, right? So I knew right away, okay, and I'm sitting with this very phone. I'm sitting there now, reaching out to my union president. I need to see you first thing tomorrow morning. Because this is what happened at the board meeting. And then that night, as they're still talking about me, I am filing a report with the ALA Office for Intellectual Freedom. I am reaching out to the National Coalition Against Censorship. I am contacting the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund as it's happening. So I was ready to go. When I walked into school the next morning, I thought that the same dude, the lawnmower guy who interrupted my lunch to say, oh, I think there's going to be a complaint about a book, would come immediately to see me, since one of his most valued staff members, someone who had an outstanding performance evaluation every year of her career. I got 4s on every one of my evaluations, the highest you can get every year I worked at that school. I thought he would beat a path to my door immediately. Again, naive. He didn't. And if I could redo one thing in this story, I would not have been the polite, respectful version of Martha who worked at that school at that time. My thought was, oh, he's the principal. He's very busy. He probably doesn't have time to worry about me. Bullshit. I should have marched down to his office with my hair on fire to say, that was ridiculous. Why did nobody speak up for me? Where were you in that conversation? And what are you going to do about it now? I didn't do that. Let me advance the story a little bit. But what happened was the administration was horrible. They were accusatory. They were adversarial. Basically, every interaction they had with me was as if I were a pornographer, pedophile, and groomer of children. Once these demons were unleashed at that board meeting, I started taking incoming like you wouldn't believe, in terms of hate mail coming into my school email account, via snail mail. Colleagues with whom I had worked, for 17 years started shunning me, would not speak to me. The students who were associated with the parents at the board meeting would come in to the library, and these kids were not library kids. They weren't readers. And that's a hilarious thing. These parents had nothing to worry about because, believe me, their kids weren't reading these books or any others. But those kids started coming into the library and intentionally seeking out books with LGBTQ plus topics, throwing them on the floor, misshelving them, turning them, spine in so that you couldn't see them. And this was going on day after day after day. Eventually about, and I should add, when they eventually filed the challenge paperwork that's required to actually launch a formal challenge, they were so dumb as to put in writing the defamatory language. So on the challenge forms, it says Martha Hickson is guilty of distributing pornography to minors. They wrote that down. Now, if I were the litigious type, I'd be rolling in dough right now, but I'm not the litigious type. In addition to the 2 books that they mentioned at the board meeting, they also went after, when they finally filed the challenge paperwork. This Book is Gay by Juno Dawson. All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson. And just because, for old time's sake, Fun Home by Alison Bechdel again. So eventually the district followed its policy, unlike the 2019 situation with the superintendent, and formed a reconsideration committee, a single reconsideration committee for all 5 books. So that committee was charged with reading all 5 books in their entirety. And as you can imagine, that would take a while. So this kind of nonsense went on for months, with me getting the hate mail, the shunning, the vandalism. When parents would write to complain, they'd write to the principal to complain about the library and about me. He'd make me write the response to them. And on one particular day in late October, I was drafting one of these responses, ghostwriting his response. The board office called me that morning and demanded to see the purchasing records for all of these books. P.S. Where do purchasing records live? The board office. Why are you calling me? But they wanted the purchasing records. Some of these books, Fun Home had been on the shelf since 2006. This is now 2021. This Book is Gay, I acquired in 2015. So I'm digging through paperwork to try to get this stuff for the board office. The kids from the Gay Straight Alliance came into my office as a group and wanted me to put together for them a list of books that had straight kids in sexual situations, because I don't know if you noticed, but all the 5 books had LGBTQ plus themes. So they wanted a list like that so they could say, oh, if you're going to ban this, you got to ban that. So I had to talk these. I said, kids, no, you're going to burn down the whole library. That's not the way we do this. So I'm talking them down. And when they left my office, I could feel my heart beating out of my chest. And I had been to the nurse's office several times in the weeks before. I had never availed myself of the nurse's office services ever. And I had been there like 3 times in 3 weeks. I went down there. She took my blood pressure. It was 165/98. And for some reason, when she said that number, I burst into tears. And once those floodgates let go, because up until that time I had been nose to the grindstone, doing my job, I'm a good doobie, I started crying, hyperventilating. I couldn't speak and I couldn't stop crying. And it got to the point, and then I couldn't even form words. They had to call my husband to take me out of the building. He took me to my doctor's office, and she could not believe this mess who sat before her. And the first thing she said was, we need to get you out of that environment. And she wrote me out of work for a month. She put me on Lexapro, an anti-anxiety medication. She referred me to a therapist. And this doctor, if I'm going to name the evil names, I have to name my wonderful doctor, Jeanette Paterno. She's an angel on earth. She, on her own time, was calling me at home to see how I was doing. She was that concerned. Anyway, in that month where I was away from school, all I had to do was focus on this problem. And that's where I turned it into an activist. That's where I started building this coalition of parents and community members and students, so that by the time of the next board meeting, we had about 400 people in that auditorium to say, no, you're not going to ban books here in our school district. The original, 20, 30 were still there. Some of them are holding up signs, with Jesus's name on it. But the vast majority of that auditorium was like, And, person after person after person got up to say, this is crazy. This is the United States. We don't do this here. These books are valuable. And the most, without a doubt, powerful and persuasive speakers were the students themselves. I was so proud of those kids. And I hope their English teachers were proud of them too, because their oratorical and writing skills were on magnificent display. Talk about, writing a persuasive essay. They did it that night.
Martha, that was the thing that hit me the most. Those voices were so powerful and so very prepared. So they had 2 minutes?
3, they get 3. Yeah.
3?
Yeah.
3 minutes. Writing a 3-minute speech is way harder than writing a half an hour speech.
Yeah. Oh, writing tight is hard.
Yeah, but they got up there, they had confidence, they were articulate, they understood that they were citizens and they had rights. And that speaks to the way you prepared them as a school librarian, because they knew they could speak up. They knew they had voices, and somebody has to be behind that kind of confidence. And it was you. And so I see that other silver lining in this. These kids carry that with them for their lifetime. They made a difference.
Yeah.
And your alumni made a difference. They called in from all over the country.
So proud of those kids. And you're right, the alumni did reach out. I'll just kind of fast forward again. So, and one thing I want to mention about the kids who stood up, many of them self-identify as members of the LGBTQ plus community and mentioned that at the podium. And here's what really got my blood boiling. So the kids who self-identified, as they'd be leaving the podium, people holding the Jesus signs, jeering and taunting them. So they say they're there, to protect the children, but what they're doing is attacking the children in front of my very eyes. Anyway, this went on month after month after month, with no word from the reconsideration committee until
Dr. Boyer.
This went on until late January of 2022, and the Friday before the Tuesday board meeting, Friday night, board meetings on Tuesday, I look at the agenda that they had just posted, and there was the decision from the reconsideration committee. They were saying, we're going to keep 4 books, but we're going to ban This Book Is Gay. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. That was the most frequently circulated nonfiction book in our collection. I mean, it went out as often as Looking for Alaska or any of the, most wildly popular fiction books. And I could see in my mind's eye the faces of the very kids that I had checked that book out to over the years. And when you work in a library, you get your library regulars. You really get to know these kids. And I'm like, you can't take this book away from these kids. So I'm like, I got to scramble. I have a weekend now to save this book. And that afternoon was the first time I really noticed that in little tiny mouse type on the cover of that book, introduction by David Levithan. David Levithan, he is from New Jersey. And I bet through my library network, could get in touch with him. I didn't know David at that time. So Saturday morning, bat signal out to the NJSL listserv. Does anybody know how to get in touch with David Levithan? Michelle McGreevy in Hoboken said, well, I think he shops at the bookstore, independent bookstore in Hoboken. I'll check. 2 hours later, David Levithan and I exchanging emails. He agreed to write a letter to the board. This wasn't his first rodeo. He said the board's not going to care about who he is or what he has to say, but please have a student read it on his behalf. And that's what we did. I had alumni. This was during COVID times, so geography was not an obstacle. This Tuesday meeting was held just like this by Zoom. So we had alumni coming in from out of state. 50 people were teed up to speak at this board meeting. After everyone spoke, the board discussed, the board voted, and the board rejected the recommendation of the reconsideration committee and voted to retain all 5 books. Yay! Victory! Yay! 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 So happy! Until
yay!
They didn't stop. 3 of the book banner group ran for the Board of Education. So that September of 2022, one of them was elected. November of 2022, one of them was elected. They ran again, November of 2023, another one was elected. And then the year after that, the remaining one who ran and wasn't elected tried to ban another book. And that guy went after Let's Talk About It, which is a sex education book in graphic novel format. Same thing, she's distributing pornography, it's obscene, blah, 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 blah. Well, by now, old pro, come at me, bro. We went through the same process again. The only wrinkle this time was that he filed that paperwork in January of 2024. He filed the challenge in January 2024. And one of the new board members, I'm naming names, Cynthia Reyes Stadoulis, she's one of the OG book banners. She was now sitting on the board, and her husband, Christopher Stadoulis, I'm naming names, started creating and posting horrible videos about me. I don't know if you guys have encountered the New Jersey Project Facebook group. It's now private. You really can't see it, but it's just awful, extremist, ultra right-wing nonsense. He started posting this on that group, which has about 14,000 subscribers. So the hate mail just went off the charts. And on Martin Luther King Day, after he started doing this, so let me be clear, we now have the household of a board member attacking a staff member. Martin Luther King Day of 2024, I opened up my school email because this girl never took a day off because that's how she was. And there was this hellacious email in there. You'll see it in the film. And it was written by an ally of Christopher Stadoulis. And this was a man who owned a tactical shooting supply company. So when you're looking for a laser scope for your AR-15, you'd go to this guy's company. And that freaked me out big time. And I had to get the police involved. But anyway, this continued. And in May of 2024, there was finally a resolution on that matter. And once again, they lost. That book is still in the library. So again, you know, these people who are saying it's porn, it's porn, it's porn, we know it's not porn. And the proof of that is the fact that a reconsideration committee and board members have read the entirety of all of these texts and have determined that this is not pornography. There is value, and there is value that is appropriate to the lives of teenagers. And then fast forward yet again, I retired in November of 2024, so life is good.
But before that, I would love for you to talk about the Freedom to Read Act and what kinds of resources that gives us. Yeah. And what was your involvement in that, Martha?
So remember I said that month when I was home, it turned me into this kind of accidental activist. So one of the things that happened along the way, if you look at the timeline, September 28th, 2021 is when this started for me. That precedes the Krause list in Texas. That timeline, unfortunately, made me one of the very, very first librarians in the United States to be targeted in this way. And then when I started fighting back and talking about it, little local media outlets started expressing interest. And then eventually School Library Journal asked if I would write an article about what it's like to be the target of a book ban. And I was hesitant to do it because I didn't want to be the poster child for book banning. And I'm not, thank God for Amanda Jones, she is. But I did write that article. And that just unleashed the floodgates of interest. Through that, I started getting lots of requests for speaking engagements to community groups, church groups, library organizations. And in the spring of 2023, I was on a panel about education issues for the Hunterdon County Democrats. And I told essentially this story I just told you. And after that was over, a man came up and introduced himself to me, a man that I wouldn't have been able to pick out of a lineup if he had paid me $1 million. And when he introduced himself to me, he said that he was Senator Andrew Zwicker. And he wanted to know what could he do to help from a legislative perspective. Now, in April of 2023, that's where this conversation took place, we were a month away from J.B. Pritzker in Illinois signing Illinois' anti-book banning bill. And I had been following that very closely. So I said to Senator Zwicker, hey, you know what? I would like you, please, to take a look at what J.B. Pritzker is going to sign out in Illinois. If Illinois can have a bill like that, why can't we? And I do a lot of talking, and I never know, where my voice will land. And I kind of thought I might have just been talking into the wind as usual. But unbelievably, 6 months later, Zwicker teed up a bill. And the bill went through the whole legislative process. You know, what you write originally isn't what ends up getting passed. It gets massaged. A lot of people weigh in. But I was involved all along the way in terms of testifying for the bill. Some of my students even testified for the bill. I want to shout out to the wonderful Mitchell DaCosta. He was by my side as a wee little freshman in high school. He is now a great big tall freshman in college, and he fought alongside with me, even coming down to Trenton to testify. But the bill was signed by Governor Murphy. I had the privilege, in fact, I have it handy that I could grab it. I don't know where it is right now. It's in this office somewhere, but I had the privilege of being given the first pen that Governor Murphy used to sign the bill.
I have a photo of that.
Yeah. And what it does, what the bill does, it requires that libraries around the state, both school and public, have policies that make clear their selection criteria and their challenge process. Because believe it or not, some libraries didn't have that. So that's a great protection, not only for librarians, but also for readers and for parents like those who wanted to object to books in my library. They now know how to do it without, making career-ending false accusations. So it does that. It also states that you cannot, in the state of New Jersey, remove books from a library for ideological reasons. And it also asserts the professionalism of librarians and says that librarians who are performing their jobs in good faith cannot be prosecuted for doing their work. Because I forgot to mention, along the way, they tried to have me arrested. I'm still at large. So that's in a nutshell what the bill does. And the governor signed it in December of 2024. It went into effect in December of 2025. Now, I don't rest easy every night because book banners, I will give them credit for this. They are persistent and they are wily. And what they're doing now is looking for loopholes that will help them evade the Freedom to Read Act. And there's a prime example of that going on right now in Reddington, also in Hunterdon County. I don't know when Hunterdon County, Colleen, turned into Texas and Florida, but it is.
I was gonna say, this does not feel like to everybody, this looks a certain way. It seems like Texas and Florida, but it's like, I don't know. It's just crazy.
I don't know when that happened. It was probably always there. But in any event, in Reddington, also in Hunterdon County, what their board just did, the Department of Education, in partnership with the state library, crafted model policy language based on the Freedom to Read Act that school boards could adopt. And most school boards are just adopting the model policy language because why reinvent the wheel? Reddington, no. They wanted to have their own flavor of this. And because they don't trust their librarian, apparently, they put in language that the librarian must identify sensitive topics that she plans to purchase. And those sensitive topics need to be reviewed by an in-school panel to determine whether they're allowed to be purchased. Well, you strip all that nonsense away, and what you have is a formula not only for librarian intimidation, especially if you're a librarian without tenure, but also pre-banning the books. Let's ban them at the point of purchase. If we find that vaccines are too sensitive, climate change are too sensitive, abortion is too sensitive, LGBTQ plus people are too sensitive, whatever the dominant faction of the board finds to be sensitive, they just won't buy books on those materials. And maybe, Colleen, you've had conversations with some of your former classmates, but I know I've heard from kids who've graduated from our high school, which is predominantly white, predominantly affluent. These kids leave the tiny bubble of the North Hunterdon community and go off to colleges far and wide, and they're astounded by the diversity of the world that they're presented with that they had never seen for the 12 years of their education beforehand. So sheltering these kids from sensitive topics is just dumb.
Martha, I was curious when that happened in Reddington, because I recently met with Stephanie for the school libraries tour back in, I think it was November.
Yeah, things were brewing then.
Okay.
Stephanie had her own little go round with me and Earl and the Dying Girl, and was able to save me and Earl and the Dying Girl. That was about a year and a half ago. Well, like I said, they're persistent. These book banners, they never got over that. So now there are new board members who are taking their first look at the horrible, horrible Me and Earl and the Dying Girl. And they never want to see anything like that on the shelves again. So this policy language, they had the first reading of it in January, and the second reading and passage is now policy happen in February.
Oh my God.
Joke's on them though, because they've now been reported to the Department of Education, which is, looking into that as a violation of the Freedom to Read Act. So they basically signed up, for some hefty lawyer bills.
Yeah.
But, you can imagine the position that Stephanie's in.
Yeah.
If somehow she orders a book that she does not perceive to be sensitive, but the board member in the tinfoil hat can't handle, who bears the brunt of that? It all comes down on the librarian, and she'll be seen as insubordinate or whatever.
Yeah, that is, it's just too much of a gray area. Oh, we think this is too sensitive. Like, that could be anything. And she's responsible for the book orders. She doesn't have an assistant. Like, the whole thing is just like, she's on her own
And
there,
then, P.S. You have people, this in-school committee, and if the in-school committee can't make a decision, they refer it to the board. Well, no one on the in-school committee has the master's in library science. No one on the in-school committee has the knowledge of publishers, authors, materials, and student reading interests that the librarian has. But everybody wants to second guess the librarian. I'll tell you, along the way in my journey, after that 2019 situation where Bender wanted to get rid of Fun Home, when he lost that battle, he was so pissed. He said, okay, I'm going to get her. He then required that anything I wanted to order, he established one of these in-school committees that was going to be composed of like a social studies teacher, an English teacher, blah, 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 not the librarian, and several administrators. And I had to give my purchasing list to this committee to review for them to decide what books I could order and what I couldn't. And I'm like, all right, I'll play. So what I did, I had a very healthy book budget. I got to say that was great about the district. And as a result, we had a wonderful library collection. But I ordered books, hundreds of books at a time. So I'm like, okay, you want to do my job? Do my job. So for every book I had on that book list, I printed out the 5 or 6 reviews that I had read of every book. I put together, there were like, for every person on this committee, there must have been 3 like 6-inch binders of all these reviews and the book list for every person on the committee. I'm like, here you go. And the next day, lawnmower guy, the principal, came in on the slide and said to me, I don't really want to do this committee thing, do you? I'm like, no, I don't want to do it. He said, let's not do it. Fine with me. So we didn't do it. But that's what you call malicious compliance. So I complied maliciously.
It's just crazy. Like, do you want to go through the Rutgers master's program and get your MLS and then decide? Like, you don't know what you're talking about, like.
I know.
Yeah.
But it's just this level of disrespect for the profession that's baked into all of this. Everybody, and teachers deal with some of this too, because everybody went to school, so everybody thinks they can teach.
Right.
A lot of people have been in a library, or a lot of people have read a book, and their perception of what a librarian is sitting around eating bonbons, reading books all day. So I could do that. So it's just ignorance.
Yeah. And I find that board members in a school board, that's the only place people really can get up and speak up in their community. And so they choose to do that. But I just want to point to, like, book resumes for Unite Against Book Bans now actually helps us gather these reviews. And our own Jennifer Lagarde's Among the Stars, I put it in earlier, I'll put it in again, is a list of books that have gotten multiple stars from multiple review spaces. And I believe the links are there as well. So this work is not, maybe not tell everybody on the administrative end, but this work for us is not as hard as it might have been. And certainly we have novelists and things as well.
My fingerprints are in all of that. I created book resumes. I am the inventor.
You did it.
Yeah. And I now partnered, since I retired, Jennifer was looking for help curating the Among the Stars list. So I do that every month with her.
Martha, you're amazing.
I
I
can't
have all these questions, but I want the students to be able to talk to you. So don't be shy, folks. I have a problem with filling voids and I do it. So I want to see. Are there any hands up?
Rebecca has a question in the chat. I've seen the film and it was incredible. Congrats. I'm currently taking, I'm gonna pop this open here. It just popped up as a preview. Where's my chat? Can you see Rebecca's question in the chat?
I can. She says, hi, Martha. I've seen the film and it was incredible. Congrats. I'm currently taking Rutgers LIS Searching the Information Landscape course. Thanks for the amazing curriculum, Dr. Olenza. Yay. Where we're learning about databases and the advanced skills to search them. I'm curious if you've ever encountered incidents of databases being censored for such as for gender or sexuality topics. I know that's been going on.
Yeah. My particular book banners aren't that smart. They don't know what a database is. Although somebody must have told them that there's porn in there too. So they tried mumbling about that, but they didn't have sufficient vocabulary to really make progress. But it is happening elsewhere. Utah is a example of where there's been a lot of pearl clutching over databases.
I haven't heard much recently, but about 5 or 6 years ago, EBSCO and Gale were in, I don't know if they were being sued or not, but those articles are in the database. We can dig those up if you need them.
Yeah, but you know, they're not indexing Hustler at EBSCO.
No.
You know, I'll never forget there was a kid, a very, very academic kid who was interested in becoming a plastic surgeon, and he was doing a research paper, and he ended up going on this whole tangent about his paper went into stuff about, you know, plastic surgery on, you know, female reproductive anatomy, and then he found these articles through the database, but of course they're scholarly articles. I mean, if anybody's getting off on that, they've got their own particular kink that we can't correct for.
Any questions? Any other questions from our students?
I just wanted to say I'm also unfortunately a graduate of North Hunterdon.
Rebecca!
Hi.
Lurking, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. Are you gonna become a librarian too?
I am. I'm going more for public librarian, but like public children's, yeah.
Oh my gosh. This makes my heart so happy.
Yeah.
Wow.
See the ripples, Martha? They're so important, aren't they?
Oh, Rebecca, it's so good to see you.
It's so good to see you. I want to say thank you for making the library like a safe space for us when we were there, because it was I don't know, I always felt like Hunterdon County was a little bit like Florida and Texas when I was there. Especially for like the LGBT community, it was kind of crazy. But like I always remember that we got to do our Day of Silence meetings in the library. I remember all of us checking out This Book is Gay in like 2015, 2016. And even for other stuff, like we got to have our gun walkout, kind of like a meeting in the library after. So I don't know if I have a question, but
I still have a picture on my phone of you guys with that gorgeous, I forget who drew it, but that beautiful picture of the young woman from Parkland.
Yeah, it was Alana Conway, she drew it. Yeah.
I still have that picture on my phone.
I do too.
And interestingly, Kim Snyder, the director of the librarians, you should do a deep dive on Kim's work. She's done a lot of stuff, a lot of documentaries on gun violence, including 2 documentaries on the Parkland shooting. And Emma Gonzalez, the young woman in that picture, is a dear friend of Kim's, along with David Hogg and a lot of those other Parkland kids. So there's this strange intersection of the book banning thing and the gun violence thing, and now you guys, and oh wow, I can't wait to
definitely similar groups, I think, of students that were against our protest and that called us names in the hallway just because we had a pride pin on our backpack. But yeah, I was thankfully not at North when the book banning was happening. But my little sister was, Emma. I don't know if you remember her. And she just kind of like kept me updated on it all the time. And I wanted so badly to come down to a board meeting. I couldn't make it happen, but yeah, we were all paying very close attention and watching what was happening.
Oh, that makes me happy to know because it was a very lonely time for me in that building. That's the longest walk every day was from my car through the parking lot into that building. No one would speak to me, and I actually felt unsafe. So,
Well, how about we take one more question from a student? I want to respect Martha's time. I know she's leaving for San Francisco in the morning. Is there a final question that we can go to?
there are two in the chat. Let's see.
Oh, let's see. We have one from Nathaniel and one from Hannah.
Let's see. What are some of the experiences?
You decide. And if you feel like taking both,
I'll do both. What helped shape me into the person who could tackle post 2020? Oh, what did help shape me? Well, I want to give a shout out. My father died in May. And one of my great regrets about my involvement with this film is that he didn't live to see it. He was actually interviewed in the film. He came to those board meetings. He was very ill and frail in the last 3 years of his life, and he spent much of the last 3 years in his life in tears over what he saw with his own eyes happening to me. And he was extremely influential in making me a reader. My earliest memories of reading are sitting in his lap, making me someone who would speak my mind and who would not tolerate injustice. So it helps being brought up by someone who models that behavior. So that was definitely a huge influence on my life. And the other thing that's hugely influential for me, especially as we think about the current situation, I was a young teenager, like 13, 14, during the Watergate era. And I was the kind of nerd, I spent my whole summer watching the Watergate hearings. I was glued to it. I held Woodward and Bernstein in high esteem, and that gave me a very healthy skepticism of government and leadership. So although I respect the position, I don't always respect the person. And certainly at North Hunterdon High School, that kind of gimlet eye stood me in very good stead. Hannah, given the great divisiveness that seems to grow each day in this country, particularly regarding trans and other LGBT folks, how do you suggest librarians be the most proactive in preparing for censorship issues? Oh, I like that. I know we have the New Jersey Freedom to Read Act and activism, but what do you recommend for preventive measures preparedness? Yeah, it's
and Lauren has a follow-up to Hannah.
I'm like, first of all, I got to catch my breath. I'm reading Lauren's question. Don't bother with updating policies because he thinks it will draw attention. What would be your response to that? Well, in terms of the proactive piece, like I said earlier, you not only know the people who are influential and who you can count on to be allies, but knowing the policies and processes is key. You need to know the policies in your organization like they're on the back of your hand. You know, what happened to me starting in 2019 was not the first time I had dealt with complaints about books. Over the years, maybe once every 2 or 3 years, a parent would pop up to complain about a book, and it would result in a conversation. Number one, the conversation piece is totally off the table now. They just, show up with their pitchforks and torches at board meetings. But the conversation would, give an opportunity to talk about the value of the book. But every time this happened, especially if it came in through an administrator, the administrator would be like, oh, we have to get rid of this book. The parents are complaining. We have to get rid of this book. In fact, in one case in around 2010, 2011, a parent complained about a book called Where the Heart Is by Billy Letts. And she went to the superintendent, different superintendent at that time. I'll name this guy too, Charles Shadow. And he said, oh my God, this book is in the library. It talks about an unwed mother giving birth in a Walmart. We have to get rid of that. We have to protect their innocence. And so he wanted me to put a sticker on every book that had a sensitive topic in it. I'm like, first of all, tell me what sensitive means. Secondly, you don't have enough stickers. Thirdly, you have a policy. Let's read it. So in every one of those previous instances where a conversation resulted between me and the parent, I had to walk an administrator back from the brink of becoming a book banner. And the way I did that was by pointing to policy. They never know the policies, so you have to. That is the best thing you can do to be proactive, is know the policies, which brings me to Lauren's question. I don't know what library you're in, but that response is just crazy. And in addition, no one but the librarians as my story just illustrates, is really reading the policies. So, making routine policy adjustments is not problematic. And as regards the New Jersey Freedom to Read law, you have to do it. It's part of the law. Those policies must be now in your books. Otherwise, you're violating the law.
Just to say, that is so helpful to hear from someone who's like experienced and now retired, because my district paired me with this other librarian to be my mentor because he's been in the district long and is close to retirement, quote unquote. And like, it's hard when they pair you with someone and you're supposed to think that they know everything. And I'm coming in and I'm like, I know that these need to be updated. So I just needed the justification, I think. Thank you.
You're welcome. The other thing is, especially, I don't know who this dude is, but not all librarians, I hate to say it, but not all librarians are created equal. And sometimes you're going to get, especially if they're close to retirement, you might be paired up with someone who's just trying to like stay under the radar and coast their way out of there. And you're there kind of, jostling the silverware a little bit, and kind of, you might, believe it or not, he might see you as somewhat threatening. You've all the latest and greatest stuff that he doesn't know and isn't going to bother to learn because he's got one foot out the door. So he might be a little scared of you.
Yep. You guys are the only people in the school district who are going to wave this banner, and it's one we need to wave. So, and you are seeing evidence of the impact it has on Rebecca and Colleen, and you can make that impact on generations to come by making books available to those kiddos who deserve them. Martha, I could talk to you forever, and I know you need to go to San Francisco and do good things there, and meet Gavin Newsom.
Yeah, like I said, I'm very ambivalent about that. He's had some very problematic things come out of his mouth in the last
this week. My goodness.
Yeah.
Well, can we show Martha some love and bon voyage as she has this next exciting trip where she's going to make a difference? Martha, thank you so much.
Joyce knows how to get in touch with me if you need me. Colleen knows how to get in touch with me if you need me. So great talking to you guys. And Rebecca, I'm just like, you've made my night. And Colleen, of course, you made my night.
This love.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank
Martha,
you.
safe travels, my dear.
Okay.
I'm going to stay around for the students, but you go and pack.
All right. I
Love
will.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.